These are hyraxes, small mammalian herbivores that look a bit like rabbits with shorter ears. In the Pokémon universe, they served as the real-world biological inspiration for Nidoran, one of the original 151 creatures introduced in 1996. Biologically, Nidoran Female presents an absolute absurdity. She is the only unevolved baby form in her entire family tree capable of breeding. Once she matures into her larger adult forms, Nidorina and Nidoqueen, she becomes completely sterile. The anomalies continue into the Pokédex itself. Unlike every other sexually dimorphic species in the franchise, the female Nidoran occupies a completely separate numbered slot from her male counterpart. While most Pokémon families follow a predictable internal logic, the Nidoran line stands apart. It behaves as a fragment of the series' earliest days that has somehow resisted every attempt at modernization. This persistence shows how decisions made for the original, limited hardware became permanent, defining the species' biology for the next 30 years. The first generation of Pokémon games was built under severe technological constraints. Developers were cramming a massive role-playing experience onto a cartridge with less memory than a modern text email. The original game engine lacked the memory or architecture to support a systemic gender mechanic. Every creature was, in the game's code, effectively genderless. To include sexual dimorphism anyway, developers used a rigid workaround by splitting the male and female Nidoran into two entirely separate species in the database. When Generation 2 finally introduced a true gender system, developers could have merged the Nidorans. However, doing so would have disrupted the sequence of the original Pokédex. To protect the integrity of the original 151 numbered list, the developers accepted a permanent biological anomaly. That rigid code eventually created the evolution paradox. Exposing Nidoran Female to a moonstone triggers her growth, but it also renders her incapable of producing eggs. The origin of this infertility rule is a single throwaway sentence printed in a 1996 strategy guidebook published by Creatures Inc. Subsequent game developers treated that printed sentence as binding law. They hard-coded infertility into the franchise, maintaining the rule for over a quarter of a century. Fans have spent decades trying to rationalize this using real-world ecology. One theory relies on the concept of carrying capacity. It suggests that as poison types with few natural predators, Nidorans would breed as rapidly as rabbits and quickly outstrip their food supply. This led to the menopause theory, which argues the species evolved early-onset infertility specifically to prevent overpopulation and mass starvation. This creates a deep irony. A fanbase has spent decades inventing complex ecological systems to explain what was likely just a publisher's copywriting mistake. Modern gaming engines handle form changing and gender fluidity seamlessly, entirely free from the rigid memory limitations of 1996. But Nidoran Female is trapped by her own history. Adjusting her biology now would mean invalidating decades of established, consistent lore. Nidoqueen remains a fully grown mammalian beast, unable to produce offspring because of a rule established before the series had a breeding system. This shows how temporary fixes in software development often survive much longer than the hardware that necessitated them. When a typo persists for decades, the error becomes biological fact, a law of nature.